Toronto Blue Jays are all in as following a brand new report from a notable MLB insider. The Toronto Blue Jays plans for the deadline have been revealed and they are electric. We're going to break down exactly what that report is, but also dive into another new report surrounding one player in particular that has fans fired up. We also have a few other updates, including an update surrounding the Jays coming out of the All-Star break. A ton to go over today, folks. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, you guys have been absolute beasts with the support, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys again for your continued support over here as we're on the road to 20,000 subscribers and the big goal, of course, 25,000 subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into it. Some big reports have dropped, and Bob Nightingale came out with a huge report, and it is very interesting. And of course, as the Jays inch closer and closer to the trade deadline, a couple weeks away now, their series against the Giants starts on Friday. But Bob Nightingale came with an article and said, GMs believe that the Toronto Blue Jays could be as aggressive as any team in baseball at the deadline, believing this could be their best chance to return to the World Series since 1993. The Jays are looking for a front-of-the-line pitcher and have shown interest in Zach Gallen. And of course, we'll have another video covering Zach Gallen and everything related to that specific player, and we've already had videos covering Zach Gallen. I'm diving into another report that just dropped late last night surrounding an electric reliever, so stay tuned to the end of the video for that. But let's start with this report, and it kind of gives me chills a little bit to think about at the All-Star break, and as we approach the trade deadline, the Jays are not only seen as buyers, but one of the most, if not the most aggressive team at the deadline. And we've heard this from numerous reporters, not just Bob Nightingale. We've heard it from several. And of course, now it is their best chance in theory to win the World Series since 1993. But at least, again, 2015, they probably should have won the World Series that year, or at least should have had a good chance to. 2016, meh. It is the first time in the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. era, I think, that their team is playing this good of regular season baseball. You could argue 2021, even though they didn't make the playoffs, especially down the stretch. But this is an electric report. They are making starters Zach Gallen. This is the Diamondbacks as well, to give some context surrounding who the Jays could be pursuing and some other notes. They are making starters Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly available, as well as all-star third baseman Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor. They are all free agents after the season. The D-backs are searching for young pitching in return, which is an interesting one. And of course, we'll have a video covering the full scope of that. But it now becomes interesting to see who the Jays will be, fully targeting here, because at the end of the day, Trey Savage is a young starting pitcher. Ricky Tiedemann is a young starting pitcher. And regarding the Jays, they are actively looking for a guy like Zach Gallen. They're actively looking for everybody they can possibly grab. And to see that the Jays are going all in, again, is absolutely electric. And they're going to be obviously cruising the market in a few different ways. I still think Josh Naylor is an interesting fit. Fits weird as it pertains to, Anthony Santander when he returns. But Eugenio Suarez, a guy who can play third base and just is an electric bat, who, top 10 in the league in homers, top 5 in the league, I believe, in homers, would be unbelievable. And maybe you could package a guy like Merrill Kelly with Eugenio Suarez and really just go all in. And you would assume if that's the case, you're giving up one of your top prospects, whether that be Arjun Amala or Trey Savage, which makes things very interesting. But another report dropped last night revealing that a handful of teams have checked in on Mason Miller. And according to two sources and interested front offices, the Athletics are much more open to the idea of trading Miller than they were a year ago. Price might still be prohibitive, but the door there seems to be open. And this is a big report. Now, we don't know for sure if the Jays were one of those teams that have checked in on Mason Miller. If you're unfamiliar, we saw him against the Athletics there before the All-Star break. One of the best closers in the MLB, like one of the most electric pitchers in the MLB. He averages 102 miles an hour. This would be the player that I would go all in for, of course, as well as a starting pitcher. You have the assets to do that. And this report came out and it really got me thinking, because the Toronto Blue Jays are obviously at a point now where, a Mason Miller type acquisition would be he would be their closer, but he would help them win games out of the bullpen, right? You have him and Jeff Hoffman as a setup man. Jimmy Garcia would be pushed down in the 7th inning, depending on the things. Mason Miller is unbelievable and like one of the best young pitchers, one of the best young players, period. He averages 101 miles per hour. He obviously, this season is also one of his, I guess, quote unquote down years. Last year was his best year. He would be truly just an unbelievable addition. And they still need to get starting pitching. They need to get Zach Gallen or someone like, and I don't even know if Zach Gallen would be the answer, but they need to get a starting pitcher. We've talked about on the channel, Seth Lugo, players like that. If you could go out and get a Seth Lugo or a Zach Gallen type of pitcher for a guy like a Relvis Martinez and Adam Macko, a couple, top 10 prospects, but not your blue chip prospects, then you go out and you move a guy like, Trey Savage or somebody else like that for another either starter, or maybe even in this case, like you move a guy like Trey Savage for Mason Miller. you're really putting yourself in an interesting position. Now, I do think if the Jays are going to go out and trade one of Trey Savage or Arjun Amala, they're going to want either like an ace level starting pitcher or somebody with control in that regard. I don't know if the Jays would trade Trey Savage straight up for Mason Miller, but it's very rare you get a 26-year-old closer with those 101 miles per hour. Now, let me know down below, would you do Trey Savage for Mason Miller? Let's just assume it's straight up. I don't think I do, just because relievers are so volatile, and we've seen even seeing it this year. Like, he has a 4.04 ERA, and on the surface, trading one of your top prospects for a guy with a 4.04 ERA sounds ludicrous, and it is a little bit. But he's such a dominant force that having him, like, if you're going all in, like these reports are suggesting, and I'm not saying that they should trade Trey Savage for Mason Miller. Maybe you can get Mason Miller without giving up one of your, Arjun or Trey. I think there's teams out there that'd be willing to give up some of their top prospects for a closer like Mason Miller. I truly believe that that is the case. The Athletics didn't trade him last year at the deadline because they wanted to keep him. If they're going to trade him now, which they're more open to doing, that seems to be a very unique possibility. But you have to go out and actually get somebody that is going to be really, really good if you're the Athletics, right? And he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, even with his inflated ERA. You always assume, that would probably go down, right? His whip is still very good. Even though his walks are not very good. His whip's okay, and his walks are pretty, pretty bad this year. He throws 101 miles per hour. You can throw him out of the bullpen. The Jays would have their fireballer. He's a postseason arm out of the bullpen. You still then would have to get another ace starter. And I'm not trading, Trey Savage for Mason Miller if you don't have a plan to get another starter, because starters should be your priority. Yes, the Jays need a high velo bullpen arm. That is what they need. They need swing and miss. Guess what? Mason Miller is literally the fastest thrower in baseball and basically the best, strikeout pitcher in baseball besides Brendan Little. You'd have the 1 and 2 in the MLB ranked guys out of the bullpen for strikeouts. It makes a ton of sense to me. Now, obviously, again, it would be a convoluted deal. Trey Savage for Mason Miller, maybe Arjun Amala for Mason Miller. I don't love the idea of giving up a top 2 prospect for a closer, but I'm pretty confident that according to these reports, and reports have come out, like, it would require top level prospects in order to get a guy like Mason Miller, because he has control. He's 26 years old, and he has a back end of the bullpen arm. He even started some games in 2023. So, the Jays want to try to turn him back into a starter in the future, which I highly doubt would happen. Let me know down below. We're at the point now where I'm not really prospect hugging. This is a year to go for the World Series. The Jays clearly believe it's a year that they're going to go for the World Series. It's time to actually go ahead and do that, because it's interesting. They really need relief depth, like Ben Nicholson-Smith says. They need starting pitching depth. They need everything, and it's going to be interesting. You look at the report here as well from Ben Nicholson-Smith. You have to be in on everything and see what you can do. Certain teams are going to like your prospects more than others, but you need to add starting pitching depth, and you absolutely need relief depth too. Ben Nicholson-Smith kind of doubling down on the fact that the Jays are all in. So let me know down below what your thoughts are on that. Bit of a controversial one. Would you do Mason Miller for, of course, one of the top prospects on the Jays system? But let's dive into a few other things now before I wrap up, because the Jays play on Friday, so a couple more nights before baseball is back. And I want to, circle back to what Kevin Gausman said at the end of the series against the Athletics, because no one was really talking about it. He came out and he said on the first half, to be honest, I feel like the team's playing great, but I'm not pitching well, or not as well as I would like. So happy where we're at as a team, but I know I need to be better. You always love to see that from Gausman. He hasn't been good the first half of the year, and I think there's a lot of improvement to be made surrounding this team anyway. Like, I think the starting pitching can be better. I think Vladdy can be a lot better. Bo, like, if all those guys click, you get Varsho healthy, Vladdy healthy, Santander healthy, you add some pieces at the deadline. This team can truly go on a World Series run. Coming out of the break, you have Bassett, Lauer, Berríos, Gausman, Scherzer, Bassett. So 2 powerhouse series. Hopefully the Jays can get some reinforcements and lock it in. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.